Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this MidID migration webinar on the 1st of March 2022 here from the team at Signicat. We are very happy that you are spending the morning with us. Hopefully you've refueled on coffee or tea or whatever gets you going, so that you are ready to listen to my good colleagues in today's panel. And as always, I was about to say, Lars Møller Christensen, our Danish country product manager, will take you through some of the highlights on MidID for Erhverv, the business relevant parts of MidID, give you a status on our session transfer and also a status on MidID as such. And as always, our man in the field, Helge Lund Kolstad from our Trondheim office, will update you on some of the issues that currently resides with our onboarding team, questions that are relevant for your own process, perhaps. My name is Henrik Hansen, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's webinar. And if you notice, there is, as always, a question and answer button somewhere on your screen right now. If you have any questions that you would like to address to us, and we will do our very best to answer them at the end of the session if you raise them there. So, for those, and there are still a few newcomers I can see on the participant list who don't know Signicat yet, perhaps. Who are we? Well, we are building a trusted digital world. Big words, but we actually put action to that. We are rooted in the leading identity regions, which of course is primarily the Nordics and the Benelux regions, being the digital frontrunners there. We provide you with the full cross-border services for digital identity journey. And we do so with more than 400 identity experts from in and outside of the industry. We also offer you the most comprehensive eID coverage that you can get. And for the Nordics, this means that we can actually enable you to reach up to 26 million users across the Nordic countries, which averages about 90% of the population of those over 15. So we're quite a vast number of different users. In the digital identity lifecycle, we primarily focus on three pillars, which is the sign-up services for knowing who you are dealing with. Some will also refer to this as KYB or KYC. We will make sure that the people signing in will have the authorization to do so and be verified. And finally, of course, we offer a lot of different digital signatures services that can be enabled across different types of platforms. So with that, we like to say we bring customers and trust together with technology and security being for Signicat. And that is also the foundation for how we obtain our broker certification for being a MidID broker, which of course is the topic for today's webinar. So if we take a look at what today's agenda is going to be all about, as I mentioned briefly in the beginning, Lars will give you a MidID update on how the actual migration is running from MidID to MidID. He will also take you through MitID Erhverv and the session transfer elements of today's webinar, and then we'll hand over to Helge later on. But for now, I think I'll hand over the microphone to you, Lars.
Thank you, Henrik.
Yeah, good morning from the Signicat studio.
Yeah, and good morning to all here. Yes, I will take you through these three agenda items. First, the usual MidID update. We have passed 2,242,000 migrated MidID users, and as you can see on the graph below, it seems that it's turning a little bit downwards, and we have calculated that with the speed right now, we need 180,000 users migrated per week to reach the June 30th milestone, where all MidID users should be migrated. That is the target for Digitisation and the banks. So MidID end of life, we don't have the exact date yet, but we know there's a lot of activities going on to fulfill the migration milestone at June 30th. The banks are doing a lot in that respect. So everybody should be migrated by June 30th. But we will get back to more information about the takedown of the full MidID infrastructure. Another update, as a broker, we participate in the MidID Broker Forum, and we had a meeting 2 weeks ago regarding release 7, which was in production February 9th. And we had two, let's say, service provider interesting or service provider relevant information here. We have the 3D secure support in release 7, and we also have an updated platform support in terms of which version of browsers, mobile, desktop that is supported with the MidID infrastructure. We have an upcoming release 8 in April, and the only change request we have seen that is relevant to share is that there are plans on removing Remember User ID. We don't know more about that yet, but we will probably have that on the next webinar if it has any implications for service providers at all. But based on the change request, it seems that it could have relevance in the way that MidID is presented. But we will of course share this information with you and update as we go along. That was a short update. We hoped that we would be able to share more real information with you on MidID Erhverv, but let's take this first look into the MidID Erhverv, starting with what's what, because if you take MidID, that's only for private persons, and MidID is jointly owned by Digitaliseringsstyrelsen and Finans Danmark for private persons. MidID Erhverv or MidID for businesses is a project under Digitaliseringsstyrelsen in the NemLogin 3 initiative, which holds 8-10 different large digitalization initiatives from Digitaliseringsstyrelsen, where MidID Erhverv is just one of those. So it is a bit complicated, and if you dig into the documentation, information, look into the Digitaliseringsstyrelsen's information on MidID Erhverv, I would say it is most likely that you will be confused because there's so much information, and to find exactly what you need in terms of the business part of MidID can be a bit tricky. But let's just take a look into what's it all about. With MidID Erhverv, you have two main use cases. The one is where you have to issue MidID business identities for your colleagues, your employees. And the other one is when you, as a service provider, want to receive other corporate customers, employees with their MidID logging into your My Page or whatever. So it's important that if some of you are project leaders, managers, or whatever, that you differ between these two use cases. That the upper one is an internal use case that you will have to administer yourself, and the lower one is something that Signicat can help you with. We can also, through partners, help you with the upper one, but the lower one is the broker part of MidID in the MidID Erhverv area. I tried to schedule or sketch how it looks. So this is the internal part with all your employees. You have a MidID Erhverv administrator, just like you have a MidID medarbejdersignatur administrator that has some control to a self-service universe of MidID Erhverv, just like you had with MidID medarbejdersignatur, which now is connected to the NemLogin MidID Erhverv system. On the other side, you have the broker part, where you have external corporate customers, corporate users, employees that want to access your online application, My Pages, where you can use Signicat as a broker, where we support the NemLogin or the MidID Erhverv identities. So that's what we call the service provider part, and the other one is organizational part of MidID Erhverv. I hope that clarifies a little bit that you have to differ between these two use cases. This is a screen dump of the MidID Medarbejdersignatur Administrator self-service portal, and this is a screen dump of what it looks like in the MitID Erhverv. So you can say, seeing it from an administrator role, it's just another way you have set up the menus and the way you create users, the way you combine the things, choose the features you want in the MidID Erhverv. So for the internal part, you shouldn't be that worried because it's very much the same as MitID Medarbejdersignatur. Under the hood, there's a lot of changes, but from the administrative part, it's very alike. So you have these three ways of issuing internal MidID Erhverv identities. There's a lot of improvements in the way you do the migration, the sign up. You can ask your employees to use their private MidID to enroll for their MidID business identity. It's just a matter of making it so simple and easy for both your employees and for the company. For you as an administrator, this is possible, but it's not needed. It's not a requirement. It's just an option for you to make it very smooth for your employees and for the company at all. You can also issue dedicated MidID Erhverv identities with dedicated MidID authenticators to keep it totally separate from the private MidID. Of course, that will probably be the most relevant use case or relevant setup, but that's at least possible. And the last one is what we also have mentioned earlier, the possibility of using your own internal IDP, which means you can issue employee identities that will, if you go through an NCIS certification, will be compliant with MidID Erhverv's identities. We got the information, some of you maybe also have seen it from Digitisation, that the MidID Erhverv has been delayed until the second half of 2022. We don't have any specific date. The original plan was May 16th with a closed pilot phase that has been extended or delayed until H2. So we will probably see that we will start with this closed pilot somewhere in H2, let's say October timeframe. So the migration or the real work with MidID Erhverv will probably not begin until early 2023. That's my guess, but we will of course keep you updated. And as usual, the MidID or the Signicat MidID broker setup will take the complexity out of your work when it starts here. That we will front both MidID, MidID private, MidID business, and all the other add-ons that we have in the broker setup. So that's the whole idea of using a company like Signicat. Okay, then we have just a couple of slides on what we call the MidID session transfer. It's a way of optimizing user experience in MidID. We have here one of our demo service providers, SuperSafe, and now I want to go ahead and transfer my MidID session to SuperClinic, where I have to take a treatment for my health, chiropractor or whatever. So you can, as service provider A, as SuperSafe, you can create a link to another service provider, and you will then, the end user will have to give consent to transfer the MidID session instead of performing another authentication at the second service provider B or SuperClinic. You can simply just say, yeah, okay, it's fine with me that you transfer my MidID data from SuperSafe to SuperClinic. So I just accept consent as Helle Jensen here. Take the next one. And then I will be logged in with my MidID session from SuperSafe. at SuperClinic as Hella Jensen and don't have to perform the full MidID authentication again. So a way of optimizing user experience in MidID. There's a full feature set in the MidID infrastructure where you service provider A and B and broker A and B will be able to handle this session transfer as you see here. We have earlier, take the next one, Henrik. We have previously called this a one-way SSO. It's not SSO, it is a constant way of handling the session transfer as shown, but it looks, you can say, like a one-way SSO. There's no logout or you cannot go back again. We are done with the implementation and expect to go into production with this feature add-on in April this year. And if you're interested, you can contact sales. Yeah, please do so. So that was all from my side. Over to you, Helge.
Thank you very much for that, Lars. And yeah, let's go to the man in the field for a field report.
Thank you. Okay, so I call this field report. It's really, I asked our onboarding managers what kind of questions and issues they might encounter in the field that I might address in this this part of the webinar. So the first one was about international service providers. This is quite a cumbersome process in MidID today, if you're not a Danish company. So what's this like in MitID? Well, the contract is identical to the one you sign in Denmark. You still sign up with a single party, which is us. And technically, it's also identical to the Danish setup. Since we don't need to have any back and forth with any third parties, this is done in hours and not weeks, as the case is with the international MidID service providers. As for details you need to provide, you need to have a VAT number and a country code. Two-letter country code conforming to ISO 31662, if I'm not greatly mistaken. In other words, it's much easier than it is in MidID. The second question was about graphical layout. What can be changed, what cannot be changed, and why is it different from our regular graphical profiles? Well, let's talk about the two first points first. We have two different kinds of graphical profiles. This is the basic graphical profile and the advanced graphical profile. For the basic one, it's at least a simple answer. You can't change anything. There is room for the client. There is powered by the Signicat logo and a link to our privacy policy. And that's about it. You can't insert anything else. There's no room really. For the advanced graphical profile, the case is a bit different. You can customize quite a few elements. I'll get back to that. Why is the MitID graphical profile more restrictive than the regular ones? And this is because MitID has a requirement for WCAG 2.1 AA, which is an accessibility standard for those who don't know. Our regular graphical profile only fulfills 2.1a, if I'm not greatly mistaken. And since you can also, since you also have great flexibility in uploading your own profile and so on, we cannot guarantee that any uploaded graphical profile will conform to 2.1 AA. So therefore, we cannot allow the regular graphical profiles, at least for now. This screenshot is from our developer web, and it details the elements that you can customize in with the advanced graphical profile. The exception being the URL, the subdomain, which I'll also get back to. And I'll talk a bit about this link here, link/label, and I'll talk a bit more about subdomain later on. For those who want a thorough description of all these elements, I would advise that you go to developer.signicat.com/enterprise, select ID methods and go to MitID. This is part of the front end setup section. Okay, a third question we got a lot of was CPR to PID. What is it? Okay, at this point, it's probably a good idea to go over the different numbers and the different ID numbers and what they mean. So the CPR number should be familiar to most people here. This is the national ID number for Denmark. It's globally unique and it's also globally meaningful. So if you take the CPR number from MidID or MitID login and use it in a different context, it will still have meaning. This also means that if you want to actually store the CPR number in your customer database, for example, there's a heavy regulatory burden for you to do so. Some of you must do so, but most customers we have talked to seek to avoid it, primarily because of the regulatory burden. The PID number is also a unique ID. It's globally unique, but it only bears meaning within the context of MidID. So this means that if you take the PID number and use it outside MidID, then it won't have any context within any other. It won't have any other meaning within other contexts, is what I'm trying to say. This also means that there's a lighter regulatory burden connected with storing it in your customer database. It's still personal information and subject to GDPR and so on, but it's not a CPR number. And the UUID has the exact same meaning for MitID. It's not meaningful within any other context, for example, MidID, but it does have meaning within MitID. Well, the thing is, MitID does not return PID number. It only returns UUID number, and vice versa for MidID. It does not return UUID, only PID. So if you don't have the CPR number on file, only the PID number for MidID, how do you know that a returning customer has been migrated to MitID? Well, if you use our CPR to PID matching service, then you can see that MidID sort of punts the PID number over there. Sorry about that. What I mean to say is that we can enrich the MitID response with a PID number from MidID for the same user. So if somebody logs in with a PID number that you recognize, you can be sure that the UUID number for that person belongs to the same person. And for that, we also need to look up the CPR number for that, or to match the CPR number for that user during that session, but you don't have to store it in your customer database. All right, so much for visuals. What is a fallback method? Well, there are more visuals. And this is part of the graphical profile I showed you earlier on. You notice that little gray box that said don't have MitID yet, use MidID instead. Well, this is what how the fallback method manifests. So if you have this set up, then you can click that method and you can go to MidID instead, which in this case is set up to be visually identical in all respects except the actual method applet of course, except for the actual method applet, of course. You can even have a fallback method within MidID that says, do you have MitID already? Then use that instead. The only caveat for this process is that, click once, Henrik. There you go. It does require the advanced graphical profile. Because in the basic graphical profile, there is no room in which to put it. That's the long and short of it, really. Can we have a MitID.dk subdomain? Is another question that we get, and yes, of course you can have that. It's even a separate add-on, but at this point, the order process within the MitID organization bears some improvement, and they are working on that, so that in the near future they will be able to deliver this add-on in a timely manner. That's about it for questions from the field.
Thank you very much for that report, Helge, and I hope that that maybe have shed some light on also those who are currently in the onboarding process at our onboarding managers. So now is the time for me to ask my good colleagues behind the scenes if anybody has raised any questions during the session so far that we need to address for now. And Lars, I think you have the possible overview.
Yeah, there's a question here on the last topic, the CPR to PID. When MidID is when MidID is closed down, will the CPR to PID service still be running? I mean, I guess the question is that when MidID is turned down and you receive the first MidID visitor to your application, you will probably still need to get this the UID and PID together.
Yeah, this is a good question, and we are in talks with the Agency for Digitisation about that.
So a topic for next webinar, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a topic for the next webinar.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah.
Again,
does MitID contractually allow ID switching? Lars, you know about that?
Yeah, it does. ID switching is allowed with MidID. It wasn't with MidID, and there's also some restriction in other Nordic EIDs, but MidID allows actually ID switching. There is a clause in the MidID terms that you have to be careful or take into consideration, but ID switching is possible.
Yeah. Any more questions, or have the previous 15, 16, however many MidID webinars we've held satisfied the curiosity amongst the webinar viewers?
We don't have more questions in the chat box as of now.
Right. We've explained everything so well.
Yeah, sometimes we do get the questions afterwards, and obviously we will address them to you as soon as possible. But yeah, so if no more questions are to be had for today, then I will revert your attention to, as Helge also mentioned, our developer signicat.com. Search for MidID and you have all the necessary collaterals that you need. Also access to the blog post, MidID demo, and our e-guide. Lots of useful information in there. And if you are amongst the few who still need to select a MidID broker, then go to our webpage, fill in the form, and one of my colleagues will be in contact with you, and we'll see if we shall broker your MidID access. So I think almost spot on time. I think it's time for everyone here to say thank you very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your company and do reach out if there is anything. If you notice a new face here, that is our kind colleague Dorte from marketing, who works behind the scenes to ensure that you get your invitations and your transcripts and videos and everything after the webinar has been held. So from all of us here, we wish you a very pleasant first day of spring. And once again, thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.